Michael Schumacher no longer holds the record for the most Formula 1 victories, and who knows where Lewis Hamilton will get to by the time he decides to call it a day. During Schumacher's phenomenal career, could he have reached 100 wins? We reckon so, and we've gone back through his time in F1 to pick out 9 lost victories that stopped him getting to a century. Make sure you let us know what you think are Schumacher's most memorable near misses, and remember to subscribe to our channel to join hundreds of thousands of fans who keep up with everything we're doing here at the race. If you're already a subscriber, thanks for showing your support and joining us for the ride. There weren't many high points from Schumacher's comeback with Mercedes, and during those 3 years in silver he only led 3 laps. But the one time he was truly able to show a touch of the old magic could have led to a victory, had he not rear-ended Bruno Senna in the 2012 Spanish Grand Prix. That clumsy accident resulted in Schumacher taking a grid penalty in Monaco, where he then set the fastest time in qualifying. Unfortunately, he didn't get to start the race from pole, instead lining up 6th. Had Schumacher started from the front for the 69th time in his F1 career, and had his car still failed on him as it did 15 laps from the end, there's every chance this entry would have been much more heartbreaking and therefore placed much higher on our list. Schumacher won the 1994 Belgian Grand Prix comfortably, but this was the only time in his career he had a victory taken away after the race. The plank under his Benetton was found to be more worn than was permitted by the regulations, suggesting the car had been running under the ride height limit and Schumacher was excluded. Benetton tried to explain that the damage to the plank was probably the result of Schumacher spinning over a curb during the race, but the FIA technical delegate found that the damage from the curb was in a different part of the plank, and the wear in that area was not consistent with the area that was in breach of the regulations. Damon Hill inherited the win, and Schumacher sat out the next 2 races, which we've chosen not to include here as potential lost wins, to serve a ban he'd picked up earlier in the season in the British Grand Prix. Monaco was already proving to be one of Ferrari's tougher weekends in 2004 when Schumacher was taken out in a collision with Juan Pablo Montoya behind the safety car. To make matters worse, Schumacher was in the lead at the time and Montoya was a lap down. Schumacher had only inherited the lead thanks to staying out when others ahead of him pitted. He didn't think he had an answer for the pace of race winner Jarno Trulli that day, but Ferrari's plan was for him to try to pull away with clear track on the restart to build a gap before his final stop. Monaco was the only race out of the first 13 of 2004 that Schumacher didn't win. The 2002 US Grand Prix was another Ferrari benefit, and not the first race of the year to end with a bizarre side-by-side finish for Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello. Schumacher slowed at the end to allow Barrichello to close up, and the drivers approached the famous yard of bricks finish line, both looking across at each other. Barrichello took the win by 11 thousandths of a second, and afterwards Schumacher said they were trying to stage a dead heat. However, 2 other theories about this finish later emerged. One was that Schumacher was merely creating a formation finish for the cameras and misjudged the position of the line, while years later he said he felt he owed a win to Barrichello as payback for the Austrian Grand Prix earlier that year, where the Brazilian was ordered to move over at the finish. If you want to hear about that Austrian Grand Prix controversy in more detail, check out our Bring Back V10s podcast, which has devoted an entire episode to that weekend. People inside Ferrari suspected that Schumacher had already given Barrichello back a win earlier in the season, when he followed him home at the Hungarian Grand Prix despite being much quicker. Schumacher had a chance to leap Barrichello in the pit stops that day, but mysteriously couldn't find his usual turn of speed when it counted. Schumacher had control of the 1994 Spanish Grand Prix until after his first pit stop, when he rejoined the race and got stuck in 5th gear. But what should have been a problem that led to retirement, in fact set the scene for one of his greatest drives. Over the laps that followed, Schumacher learned how to keep the Benetton running competitively, somehow going quick enough to finish 2nd behind race winner Damon Hill. He was perhaps slightly fortunate that Mika Häkkinen's Peugeot engine blew up just as the McLaren was closing in after its final pit stop, but even a 3rd place would have been a miraculous achievement. Even more impressively, Schumacher managed to complete another pit stop with the problem, somehow pulling away from a standstill in 5th gear. Schumacher said the second place felt as good as a win, and who are we to argue? Hill's victory was an emotional one for Williams, coming just 2 races after the death of Ayrton Senna at Imola. While recovering from his broken leg during 1999, Schumacher made it clear several times that he would not be fit enough to return before the end of the season. However, following immense pressure from Ferrari president Luca di Montezemolo, Schumacher came back for the final 2 races to help Eddie Irvine's title chances against Mika Häkkinen. Once back on track, Schumacher blew everyone away at the new Sepang circuit, qualifying nearly a second clear of the field. In the race, he played the number 2 role to perfection, letting Irvine through, then holding up Häkkinen, although the other McLaren of David Coulthard did manage to barge his way through before retiring. Schumacher ended up back in the lead after the final pit stops, slowing down to let Irvine back through to grab a vital victory. After the race, Irvine declared Schumacher to be the best number 2 in the world, as well as the best number 1. Those of you paying attention will notice that this is Monaco's 3rd appearance on this list, and Ayrton Senna's 6th and final victory in the Principality should have been Schumacher's 1st there. Schumacher comfortably outqualified Senna to line up on the front row of the grid alongside Alain Prost in the dominant Williams, and in the early stages of the race he and Prost shot away into the distance, leaving Senna's McLaren behind. Schumacher then inherited the lead when Prost was forced to serve a penalty for jumping the start, leaving the Benetton in charge of the race. Schumacher's lead was up to 15 seconds when hydraulic failure struck, putting him out of the race after 32 laps and leaving the way clear for Senna to take his 3rd win of the season. Schumacher was dominating the rain-soaked 1998 Belgian Grand Prix when he came up to lap David Coulthard with 20 laps to go. Coulthard slowed to let the Ferrari pass, but he stayed on the racing line. Blinded by the spray, Schumacher smashed into the back of the McLaren. The 2 damaged cars limped back to the pits, where a furious Schumacher marched down to the McLaren garage and accused Coulthard of trying to kill him. Schumacher also fell out with Eddie Jordan post-race, angry at the fact his brother Ralph had been ordered to stay behind his old rival Damon Hill to protect a 1-2 as Jordan took its famous first win. Schumacher and Fernando Alonso went into the penultimate round of 2006 level on points, and the championship appeared to be swinging Schumacher's way as he led the Japanese Grand Prix after the final pit stops. But then disaster struck. For the first time since 2000, Schumacher suffered a Ferrari engine failure, handing the race and effectively the title to Alonso. Alonso punched the air as he passed the smoking Ferrari, explaining afterwards that he'd suffered plenty of his own misfortune that season and he was happy to recover some of that luck. We've ranked this as our number 1 because not only did it cost Schumacher a 92nd victory, but it also took away any realistic chance of him bowing out of F1 at the end of 2006 with an 8th World Championship. Those are our choices that would have got Michael Schumacher to 100 F1 wins. Tell us which ones we missed in the comments and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed taking a look back at how Schumacher could have achieved even more in his F1 career.